I am Mike Monello. Currently, I run a marketing agency called Campfire in New York City. It all stemmed from my experiences making the Blair Witch Project way back in 97, 98, 99.
Oh man, and we'll talk about that a bit too,
Mhm.
because I'm a huge fan of the Blair Witch Project. Some of my friends hate. I'm going to be really honest with you. Some of my friends hate that movie,
Yeah.
and my mom, she's an older. So is my mom. I showed her the movie once, and she's
Mhm.
like, "I don't get it. Like, it's just a bunch of people screaming in the forest."
Yeah, it's been interesting over the years, the movie to see the way the movie was accepted, then it blew up,
Right.
it got so big, there was a backlash, and
It,
then I think successive generations have come to it, and some of them have embraced it more than others. I
oh,
think I think
yeah.
more recently it seems like the younger audiences are embracing it more than, believe it or not, that kind of mid period. Those
Right.
folks who are around for the hype, but maybe were a little bit younger, but remember the hype. I think they didn't really get it, but after that, like a lot of audiences who were not even alive when the movie came out keep discovering it and loving it, which is really interesting because they're discovering it and seeing it as a movie. Most of us saw it as an experience because of all the attendant hype, because of the internet, the website that we had, because of Curse
Yeah.
of the Blair Witch. We did a lot of world building, and so when the film came out, it wasn't really even reviewed as a film. It was reviewed as this whole kind of experience, this thing that was just happening in culture.
Absolutely, and I feel like that's the most fascinating thing about the Blair Witch Project because it really is like a project. It's uh, this entire experience, the scope of which is massive,
Mhm.
and incredible. And I just look back at it now, so that like 90, I was born in 1994, so like I was too young for the Blair Witch Project, obviously. And I
Right.
think even if I had seen it as a kid, I don't think I would have understood it very well. But and now I'm just endlessly fascinated with how that the entire uh, marketing for the movie was handled. It's just incredible to me how you guys pulled that off, and we will talk about that absolutely. But I do want to touch on Campfire actually because I'm pretty interested in, you went from Haxon Films to Campfire. Can you just tell us where the idea came to create Campfire for people that may not know?
Yes. Well, interesting. Greg Hale and myself actually founded Campfire with Steve Wax at Chelsea Pictures, and then brought on eventually other partners like Jeremiah Rosen and Steve Colson. And but the idea was formed when we were at Sundance, and after the film had been seen and screened. I remember we were eating in a restaurant, and of course, because we all had our Blair Witch pins, I think we were pretty recognizable as the Blair Witch crew. And someone came over to us who was a representative from a marketing production company called Chelsea Pictures and asked us if we were interested in directing commercials. And we all thought, hey, that's kind of interesting. We could make decent money directing commercials and maybe maintain our independence as we continue to make movies. And so we said yes. And after Sundance, we went and met with them, and we ended up signing up with them as a collective. We were called the Haxons. And for a while, we were asked to, whenever an ad agency came up with a commercial where they wanted something shaky cam, they would be like, call the Blair Witch guys, and we would get the gig. But it became pretty clear that directing things was interesting, but we started to really get a lot of questions about the internet. And a lot of ad agencies were trying to figure out the internet. A lot of clients were trying to brands were trying to figure out the internet. And I think they all caught on to the fact that we had done some interesting storytelling that captured attention. And again, at the time, even ourselves, we it was hard to understand what the internet was actually going to do at that time. So we were starting to be brought in to help advise on those things. And after working with a few agencies, I realized that these large agencies were not equipped to do the kind of work that the internet demands.
Hmm.
And it makes sense because these ad agencies thrived and made, you know, millions, sometimes billions of dollars by making commercials and radio ads and billboards and print ads. And all of a sudden, all of these, the whole ecosystem is completely changing out from under them, the whole way they make money. And yet the internet wasn't generating enough revenue to cover it, so
Hmm.
um and so I just thought, hey, there's we figured out a lot. I was like, we actually understand the internet a lot better than all these people do. um and I thought there was probably room in the market for an agency that could do storytelling online, participatory storytelling for
Hmm.
brands and clients that were interested in it. And so we started doing that mostly as directors, and we did it a few times. And originally it was, the idea was do this kind of work, make some money, and then go off and do the other work. But we just kept getting jobs. We kept getting jobs, and finally, I was still in Florida at the time. Greg had moved to New York, so he was here, and my partners were here in New York. And eventually it just got to the point where I realized, okay, either this is going to become a real business, or we have to slow it down and it just becomes more of a money making hobby. And so I just thought this was really exciting. We were having troubles with our distributor at the time over the profits on Blair Witch and
Hmm.
and our investors. And so a second movie was getting all tied up in that, and it just seemed to me like I was just itching to create. And I was I really fell in love with the stuff that we did online during Blair Witch,
Right.
and it opened my eyes. And so I just kind of dug in and decided, you know what, I'm just going to focus on this for a while. I didn't, this was what, 20 years ago. I didn't really know how long it was going to last. I certainly didn't think it was going to last 20 years, but it's been so much fun. And I've gotten to do so many things keyed, built on what I learned from Blair Witch online in terms of telling stories in a participatory manner and creating immersive experiences that give people stories to tell. That I just kind of fell in love with it, and we've kept it going since then. So most of our work is with entertainment companies. We work
Hmm.
with companies like Hulu and Disney and AMC networks and Peacock, and we tend to show up at places like San Diego Comic-Con, creating these big, large-scale experiences for people to immerse themselves in the
Hmm. Right.
in the series and shows that they love.
That's yeah, and that's impressive to see some of the things you guys have done. Right. Like, what would you say are some of your favorite projects that you feel like Campfire has put out, like recently?
Oh yeah. Well, recently I think my favorite projects have been this run that we've had. We've had a great run with Hulu, where the last two San Diego Comic Cons, we were able to bring a sub brand there called Animehem, which is really the name for their adult animation programs.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had this massive footprint, like 200 square feet or 200-foot long footprint, and we built what we called Animehem, which featured like 10 adult animated series, from classics like Futurama and The Simpsons to newer things like Solar Opposites and Hitmonkey,
Right.
that are originals, and put them in. And each one is like participatory or immersive in some way, and they're fitting in themes. And we put between 11 and 15,000 fans through them. and
Wow.
uh and it's remarkable. It's so much fun to create for this, because we get into the fandom, we figure out what really drives their love of the IP,
Hmm.
and then we really seek to create experiences that are going to give them kind of an emotional reaction, an emotional connection to the things that they love.
Wow, that's yeah, and I think you guys do a great job of that, because I've seen, some of the experiences at cons in particular that like
Hmm.
really immerse fans into whatever IP they're a fan of.
Yes.
I think you guys do a really good job of that. And I mean, what have you seen, like a reaction that to you just just really touched you inside?
Oh, all the time. I mean, just the chance, like, we did a project here in New York recently for Only Murders in the Building, where
Mm-hmm.
we went to the theater where season 3 was shot, and we created a walk-through experience that was like, we gave people black light flashlights, and we hid clues and invisible ink throughout the tour.
Oh, that's so
And we
cool.
put up, you know, the props and the costumes on display, but they were set up like it was evidence set up for police detectives to examine.
Wow.
And and it was amazing because people got to walk through this theater where the show was actually filmed, you know, a Broadway style theater, and look for clues and try to solve a mystery that the series was in. And so they were participating, they had a role, but they were also looking at these real objects. They would get on stage and they actually got to, you know, take a photo on the lighthouse where they cast the real one that was used, the cast shot on. And, you know, it's like, it's that twist of when you give somebody a role to play and then they play it, you know, they're able to kind of dig in and have as much or as little fun as they want, you know, or the kind of fun they want. And just, you know, when you stand by the exit and you see the smiles and you hear the groups of people talking about what their favorite parts were, it's so rewarding. It's kind of like that. It's like the feeling when you're a filmmaker and you know, you're standing outside in the lobby as people come out and you're listening to how people what people thought about your film. It's kind of like that, you know, when people come out. And because I think over the years we've gotten really good at knowing fandoms,
Mm-hmm.
it's we're always aiming for that big smile, that big connection where people just feel like that was something special that they just experienced. And every time we see fan reactions over that, it just drives us to do more.
That's it. And I feel like that passion really is what drives creativity, just wanting to get those reactions, whether you're, you know, making a movie, a good book, or in your case, an interactive experience. I imagine that's a lot of work. So, like, what are some of the challenges of running something like Campfire?
Oh, well, you know, I think the biggest challenge is that, you know, in this business, you work project to project.
Hmm.
And so, in a sense, you're running a company, but it's kind of like a freelance business because, you know, you basically earn more work on the back of how good your last piece of work was. And so you're constantly hustling for the next gig.
Right.
You know, it's different. You know, we don't a lot of ad agencies, because they service clients completely with everything they need, will have these kind of agency of record relationships where they're just getting paid by the month, whereas we work on a project basis. And that's a challenge for running the business, but it allows us to be far more creative, and it allows us to pitch only the things that we think this client needs to solve their problems. You know, the way we look at it is like most clients know what they want to say to people,
Mm-hmm.
right? They know what they want to promote, they know what they want to say, and they know who their audiences are.
Mm-hmm.
And we look at our job oftentimes as creatively expressing what they want, but also knowing and advocating for what fans and what people want, and finding the intersection between what does the brand want to say and what's the intersection where people are interested, or it's gonna give them a positive feeling or a great experience. And that's really the key, is to find those elements. So we kind of think of ourselves as advocates for fans and consumers,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and we endeavor always to put out something that is wanted. I mean, I hate advertising that's disruptive and interruptive.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah,
I,
those,
I mean, I pay for every streaming service to be ad free.
I
I you know, don't like commercials, and I never did. So I think in our work we try to make it something that you actually would want to do, as opposed to something maybe you feel obligated to do.
I think that's honestly the best way you could approach marketing, in my opinion, because I as well, like, I mean, sometimes I don't have the money to pay for an extra service, right? So maybe I just have to settle with the free version, right? But I feel, as you know, because I do consume a lot of this myself as well. uh, Marketing that is non-obtrusive and engaging in some meaningful way goes a long way, and I think that
Yeah,
really does stick with someone more than just an ad on YouTube that blocks you for like 30 seconds.
right. And it's interruptive. You know, it's like we look at it. The ad industry uses this word impressions,
Hmm.
you know, and they use it to mean like, you know, they paid for a banner ad and it was displayed in front of, you know, a million eyes, so it got a million impressions. But it's like it doesn't mean those eyes actually looked at it. You know, when you're creating experience, you're actually creating a memory, and I look at impressions, it's like that's the only kind of impression that matters, is the impression that they walk away with after experiencing something. Because I can't remember the last time I saw a pre-roll or a banner ad and remembered it 2 seconds after I bounced from the page to something else.
Absolutely. And it's just because you're so, like, I feel is like I've grown, from the internet as it was, in like the early 2000s to now. You just see so much of these banner ads and things in your face that they just kind of all start blending together, really. uh, so I
Yeah.
appreciate the existence of something like Campfire, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, and we do work largely with entertainment companies because I
Mm.
think, my background is really in entertainment. What I learned in marketing, I learned by just by doing it, essentially. Um, um, but I think what I love about Campfire is that we avoided trying to become something we weren't. Like we didn't become a social media agency when everybody was flipping to that. We didn't become another type of agency. We just said, you know what? We think there'll always be a market for the thing that we do. And so let's just be the best at the thing that we do.
Mm-hmm.
And so far it's worked. It's a weird kind of counterintuitive aspect because most people who start marketing agencies want to grow,
Right.
and they're judged by their year over year growth.
Right.
And for us, we kind of judge ourselves by the work that we do.
And I honestly think that's like, as because I do sometimes create things myself, and I do, writing and things like that, and I'm also satisfied with that. Like, it's not always about making a profit. It's making something that you can feel proud of, right? Um,
Yes.
Absolutely.
And that's when I mentioned that I dabble in things, that's my big thing. Like, over the past few years while I've been running Campfire and working with all of our clients, I have, sometimes like I had the opportunity. I co-created a scripted fiction podcast for Shutter, and
Mm.
that wasn't marketing. It's called Video Palace, and it's available wherever podcasts are. But that was, pure content. That was kind of me getting back into putting my producer hat on and getting into it. And then, and that podcast was pretty successful. We ended up publishing a related book,
Wow.
related in the mythology with Simon and Schuster a couple of years after that. And then last year, I worked on with the team at Stitch, the Games by Stitch,
Uh-huh.
put out worked on the story and worked with the team on a VR, a cosmic horror VR experience called Broken Spectre,
Wow.
and that's been getting phenomenal reviews, um, which we love because it was intentionally meant to be an immersive story rather than like a game. Most horror games are like hack and slash zombie games and things like that. We this is more of a story, an interactive story, but because we're using hand tracking and the controllers are your hands instead of a controller, we're
Mm-hmm.
able to do some really amazing things in the body horror genre.
Oh, yeah.
and and with cosmic horror, and we tell a really dark story, but for people who go through it, they're getting that emotional connection. So it's kind of, it's fun to take like the knowledge that we have of how people move through a physical experience and then attempt to apply that to a virtual world. And that's what I love. Like you'll notice, I just mentioned a podcast, a book, and a VR experience.
Well, I think it's good to dabble in all sorts of things, though, right? Especially you, if your wheelhouse is something that you're so familiar and comfortable with. You're like, how do I apply this to other things? Let me get into
Yeah.
video games and books, right?
Well, I think it stems from as we started Campfire. Really it was Blair Witch. I started to learn what it means to tell a story in a collaborative way with an audience, right? Where
Right.
you're not actually just telling the story. You're kind of, with Blair Witch on the website, we would do things like we would put, like if a story was the alphabet, right? We would put like A and D up,
Mm-hmm.
and it would be up to the audience to fabricate B and C based on the cues we gave them for A and D.
Right.
And that is kind of my clumsy way of kind of saying that's how we leave this kind of blank space in everything we do for audiences to fill it in or to project themselves into the narrative. And that's what makes them want to participate, makes them want to help tell the story. And that's really kind of what drove all of that we didn't use the word viral back then because it didn't exist, but that's what drove all that fan engagement for Blair Witch back in 98 before the movie was even done.
Right.
We had people making fan websites, but they weren't making fan websites for a movie because they hadn't seen the movie. What they were doing is they were making websites where they pretended to like run their own investigation into what happened in the woods,
Right.
and that stuff was really fun to find that we had put up this kind of mythology that people found interesting enough to want to tell their own stories in,
Mm-hmm.
and collaborate that way was really interesting. And then to be able to just look because it was online and watch everything that people are saying about the mythology and everything they're questioning and everything they're thinking about,
Mm-hmm.
and then being able to react to what they're doing and create some piece of content to answer questions or to befuddle them even more, and put it out in real time was totally unique. As a filmmaker, we're taught to polish our pixels, to
Right.
make everything perfect before you let it out in the world. And this was messier. It was interactive. It was live. Ed and I used to sit there at night sometimes talking to these fans on the message boards, and we used to kind of say, like, it feels like we're not being funny, but it feels like like we're on a continuously running episode of Saturday Night Live where we're just live 24/7, and we have to
Right.
keep people interested. And out of necessity, we discovered that by creating by not telling the complete story, but by leaving holes,
Mm-hmm.
that people would engage with each other to try to fill those holes, whether it was speculation or looking at evidence and making claims. And so we realized that, these audiences will entertain each other in the story by telling each other these stories. And we see this now with like creepy pasta and the kinds of
Right.
memes that go around, that when given a fertile opportunity or a fertile prompt, people will go crazy with their creativity.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
and and that was remarkable learnings. It
Yeah.
was, and that's really what informed my understanding of storytelling. So later coming back and wanting to play in different forms, I think just comes from the fact that at Campfire we've been telling stories in so many different forms of media for so long, whether it be live experiences or like when we did the strategy and launched Game of Thrones with HBO on season 1, where we
Mm-hmm.
did a campaign that was full of tactics. It was about taste and scent and touch, you know and all these kinds of it was kind of a remarkable campaign to bring this fantasy world, to make this fantasy world tangible.
Right.
Yeah. And then years later, making we did an interactive short film for Infinity, where you actually watch the short film run online, and it was about these characters whose memories get wiped because they're going in a loop. They're in some weird kind of loop, driving this car around trying to figure out how to break this loop. And
Right.
so we come into them as they are stopping in a road, and their memories get blank,
Mm-hmm.
and they look at each other and they're like, who are you, almost, even though they're in the same car. And then they're like, I don't know, they don't know each other, and they look at their phone, and it's your phone number, the
Oh,
only
wow.
number that's called or been called
That's
is your
crazy.
phone number all the way down. And so the one of the guys says, I'm going to call this number and find out. And he calls the number, and your phone rings, and you end up having a conversation with the character on the phone while you're watching the movie. and
That's nuts.
and the direction of your discussion with this character determined the next few scenes. And then you would have another call, and then the basis that discussion would determine the next few scenes. So it was fully immersive in interaction, and it worked not by you telling them what to do, but it worked by whether you could gain the character's trust or not.
No,
and
it's yeah. No,
and so it
sorry.
was,
Go
yeah,
on.
it was subtle and it was weird, but it's like that kind of thing of like, we're taking bits of technology that we've seen used in different ways and figuring out how to use it to tell a story.
And I think that's you guys have done such an admirable job. And I want to switch gears a little because I do want to talk about
Yeah.
where it started. Now, I I'm like I mentioned to you earlier. I'm a huge fan of the Blair Witch Project, and so I just want to just start off by asking, like, you just mentioned how you guys create these very interactive experiences. Looking back at the Blair Witch Project, what's like your favorite what was your favorite aspect of that marketing push for the movie when it before it hit Sundance?
Um, Boy, that is a hard one. I have different things, like in terms of in terms of like the doing the work that we did.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I loved everything about making this movie because it was super collaborative.
Mm-hmm.
And, Ed and Dan and Greg and Rob and Ben are all people that I went to film school with and love dearly. And, when you get to make something with your friends, it's 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 incredible. And we were fully indie, so we were responsible only to each other. Um, and I just I can't explain how different and unique that is from any other experience. Usually the people funding the money ultimately have a very large say in what you do, and in this one, every decision was ours to make,
Mm-hmm.
which was incredible. And but after we sold the film, and we had that 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 period of time where Artisan was starting to look at, we had made posters and stickman icons and things like that, and they were taking all our materials and starting to develop like the movie poster that they would use,
Mm-hmm.
and the trailer, the TV commercials and print ads and stuff. It was very exciting for us because we were getting these opportunities as the film's popularity was starting to grow even before it came out. It suddenly became like an opportunity to make video games. And so we were able to sit down with video game makers and brief them on the story world and talk to them and get involved in the development of 3 PC games.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We got involved with a writer named Da Stern, who wrote a book about the mythology, and we handed him all of the background info and mythology, and then he created a lot of materials, and he was creating materials that we were then using to script, or he was creating materials of characters that we were then using in Curse of the Blair Witch,
Mm-hmm.
which was another opportunity. When Sci-Fi, when they did an ad deal with Sci-Fi and got the opportunity to make a behind the scenes, and we were able to do, no, don't make it a behind the scenes, let's do a fake documentary that's more in the style of what we thought the original movie might be like. It was amazing. It was just, we knew we were doing something that we hadn't seen done, and
Right.
we knew that we were doing something that was for a mainstream audience extremely experimental. I mean, you have to remember that the only shows on TV that anyone might compare this movie to was Cops and one season of The Real World as a reality show,
Right.
and really, frankly, only Cops from an aesthetic point.
Oh yeah.
um, for the movie. But there was no Survivor, there was no reality TV, there was no Naked and Alone and Starved or whatever. It was just there wasn't a whole genre of people in the woods or in the jungle
Right.
doing things. And so this movie was, it was, the fact that it became as big as it did was really strange to us, because we knew when we had decided to jettison the documentary format and just make the film the kind of found footage,
Mm-hmm.
we knew we were making the film more experimental, not less.
You
And
know,
yet
yeah.
that's the film that grabbed everyone's attention.
Oh, it absolutely did.
It was basically, what we did to the film was exactly what a studio would refuse to do if they were in the same scenario.
I mean, it's a lot of like, I almost call it like, I look at what you guys did then with the websites, the posters, the Curse of the Blair Witch. It's almost like guerrilla tactics almost. Like you guys are sneaking up on people and giving them these like these unique experiences that they then just, like you said earlier, they let their imagination do the work. They're given A and D. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I
No.
mean, even the trailers work that way. You got to remember, in 1999, trailers were like 4 minutes long, and they gave away everything about the story.
Oh
Like
yeah.
seriously, if you go look at movie trailers from 1998, 99, and then look at the Blair Witch trailer, you can tell. You can go like, oh, that trailer doesn't look like any of the trailers that people were seeing in 1999.
No, it's wild because I like out of curiosity, well after watching the movie, did see those original trailers and like it yeah, the way you guys the way it was cut and presented, it's just like no, this is like a real thing, right?
Yeah, that was that. It's interesting because when before Artisan bought the film, we were fairly open about. I mean, we knew we were riding a line, right? And we had two websites. We had our company website, Hacks and Films, and then we had BlairWitchProject.com.
Mm-hmm.
And our thing was, and Blair Witch Project linked to Hacks and Films, like on the bottom, every page. Um, but the idea for us was that BlairWitch.com was in story, right? That was in the world of the Blair Witch, and
Mm-hmm.
so it kind of presents everything as real.
Right.
We were pulling a real War of the Worlds. But Haxon.com was our production company, and there we took that's real. Like we didn't tell stories on that site, so it wasn't that hard to click on a button and see the production site of our company and see that it was filmmakers making a movie. And most people in those early days, I would say everyone really knew it. People weren't actually fooled, and that's because if we had wanted it to be a hoax, we would have made the mythology much much harder to disprove. But I mean, we name real towns, and then we say, oh, this town was formerly the name of Burkittsville, formerly Blair. But it doesn't take much to go look at the public records and see that Burkittsville was never known as Blair, Maryland.
Right.
And because making fooling people was never what it was about. It was, we were really working on this idea of, like, we had been influenced by films like Man Bites Dog, and I'm trying to think, like oh my god, I'm trying to remember this film by Jim McBride, The Diary of, I can't remember his name.
Oh,
But it was
then
like a early Jim McBride film that was like a personal diary film, but it was fiction, and
right.
a filmmaker named Kaveh Zahedi made a film called I Don't Hate Las Vegas Anymore that I had seen that really made me think, like, whoa, a feature film can be a lot of different things. Like that was one of the first films I saw that was shot on 16 millimeter, but it was rough, and it had like camera rollouts. It was done documentary style, but it was really not documentary. So we were inspired by a lot of the films, but we hadn't seen this done in horror ever. And at the time, horror was becoming more ironic and becoming funny. The success of Scream
Right. Yeah.
made it that whole horror was big, but it was ironic horror. And
Right.
we all said, you know what, that's ironic horror is great, but so is real horror. And so we decided right away that we were going to play against the grain. We weren't going to follow the trend of making something ironic. We wanted it to be real. Even in the marketing, like one of my heroes in film is William Castle, who's notorious for all kinds of gimmicks.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember even talking to the publicity folks, and they were kind of suggesting some William Castle like tactics, and we were all like, no, 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 no. Those are goofy. They're fun, but we want to scare people.
And I think I'd say you guys succeeded because there's always that. I think I actually have the VHS behind me on like a shelf.
Oh wow.
I'm looking at it right here because that was when I was like I had this thing when I was in college where I just bought a bunch of VHSs, so I have a ton of them there, and Blair Witch was one of them. And I think on the box it says like one of the scariest films of all time. Like that's one of the line that stands out to me the most, because like really like I'm just think I always put myself in the context of like the late 90s early 2000s when the internet was still pretty rudimentary and not as complex as it is now, where you're just like, wow, this stuff's real. Wow, these people actually disappeared. Like, no way, you're lying. And then you watch the movie and it's filmed in such a candid, honest, realistic way that you just can't help but think like, no way, that's crazy. This is so scary. What the hell, right? These kids just up and disappeared. uh on that note though, I gotta ask, like, what's like one of your favorite memories from that original production though? Like what's something that you just come back to every time you think about Blair Witch?
Oh, yeah. My memory is just that feeling of, when we were editing the film, we were paying for it. We were paying for the editing gear by editing videos for Planet Hollywood. Believe it or not, Planet Hollywood was based in Orlando.
Right.
They had that huge Planet Hollywood shaped restaurant. I think they still have it in Orlando. But their test kitchen where they were experimenting with new recipes all the time for the Planet Hollywood restaurants was in Orlando, and we got hooked into that, and we would get paid $5,000 per video, and they would
Wow.
do this is really hilarious. So they would do something like, "Oh, we just signed up Wesley Snipes," and then they'd say, "We'd like a music video, a tribute to Wesley Snipes, and he's approved the use of the song Crazy by Seal." And then I would have to go and get a CD of Seal and with the song on it, and I'd go to a Laserdisc rental store and I'd rent all of Wesley Snipes Laserdiscs movies, and I would load them into our media. I would load all that footage into the Media 100, and then I would lay the music video on a timeline, and I would cut to the song, and the goal to make Wesley Snipes look as cool as possible from all the shots in his films, and we were making these music videos that would just kind of run on all the TVs and Planet Hollywoods everywhere. And so we'd make a bunch of these every month, and they would change the show out every month, and a lot of that money was what funded the post-production work on Blair Witch, because it was 8-9 months long, which is hugely expensive. And one of my favorite memories is when we went to the Cannes Film Festival, and we're there. Our film is playing, and we're on the ground that first day, and we're walking along, checking the place out, and we see a Planet Hollywood there, and we all go in. There's a lot of Americans,
Hmm.
and we all go into Planet Hollywood, and they want to seat us, and we're like, but they had a TV up, and we're like, no, 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 we just want to look at the TV for a minute. And we're waiting, and then one of our music videos comes up, and we
Oh my
all
god.
started cheering, and we're like, hey, we're playing a Can, we're like, we've been here the whole time.
Oh, that's so
But
funny.
yeah, and it was kind of funny. We were having a laugh at ourselves, but yeah. So seeing the commercial work that helped pay for the film playing at the Planet Hollywood at Cannes, while the film was playing at Cannes, was a lot of fun. And I have a lot of memories of just the memories at Sundance, the memories of being around the film, and being around people who saw it for the first time, and the reactions. It's especially after so many years of working to make it, finally seeing it out in the world was just kind of incredible.
I can imagine, just because you had probably this amazing range of reactions from like people who were obviously like impressed and affected to people who are like my mom and they're like, I don't get it. uh,
Oh yeah, well, what's funny is, dear friend of ours, Carol, when after the film came out, we hired her to answer our phones and to kind of be the office manager. So
mm,
she was our office manager after, and so she answered all the calls that would come in, and she would document. And you would not believe how many calls our office would get where somebody would yell at poor Carol about how we're horrible people for exploiting the deaths of those children, and she would listen to them, and she would
oh,
say, she would listen to them, and then she'd say something along the lines of, honey, they're not dead, they were on Tonight Show last night. Or you know pick up the latest copy of Newsweek, you'll see them on the cover, they're not dead.
oh my god.
It was, but it just kept reminding us how much people want to believe despite the evidence around them.
Oh yeah, because people want to, because it's
People
it
want to believe that there are forces in their lives that affect them that are beyond human control.
absolutely, and I think that is, you guys really captured that element really well in the movie, because it is really like a movie in the times I've watched it, about like a group of people that are just not in control of the situation they're in, like at all. Like, there's that scene
Yeah.
with the map. I think that's the most telling thing, where the influence is obviously there, and now that map is gone, even though it probably could have been useful, right?
Right. Well, Ed has always said, and I agree, that they were doomed the minute they lost sight of the car.
Oh, absolutely.
That's
Absolutely.
there was no, they were doomed.
Uh,
That's, we have ideas. We have, we created a whole mythology. So, because originally, our original idea for it as a franchise was not to do more found footage films. In fact, I'll go on the record as saying I think any future Blair Witch film that involves found footage or kids going in the woods again
mm,
is doomed to fail.
uh,
It was the franchise was never about, we never created it about found footage, because when we created it, it wasn't even going to be a quote found footage movie. It was going to be a mock documentary. And it's the mythology that people gravitated towards. It's the idea that the film is there, but there's this, it's part of a larger, deeper story. And originally we thought, oh, wouldn't it be cool to go back and say do something like the Rustin Parr story, which is a story in the mythology that takes place in the 40s. And what if we told that story as a black and white noir film? like
ooh,
like what if we told that story as if it was a film made in the 40s,
that would have,
right?
yeah, that would have been really cool.
Yeah, or what if we go back to the original, Ellie Kedward, and maybe reveal something about her that's not quite what the mythology says, and do that in a, by, and obviously films weren't made then, but light it in candlelight, and we didn't want beautiful actors with a beautiful skin and one dirt smudge on their cheek to, we wanted people to look dirty like they did in the day, and they didn't have dentists, they had bad teeth, and we want it to be kind of look real and light it with candlelight, instead of
Mm.
big lights, and make it look dark the way it would have been for those settlers in the winter. And our thought was like, wow, we could actually make a different style movie for each part of the of each story in the mythology. And that was our original idea, was like that. No, there wouldn't be. And also, the fact is that the Blair Witch comes around every 60 years, so anything that's a sequel to the first film is too early in the mythology. It breaks the mythology, basically.
So did you? So on that note, this is a question from me. This isn't one of the questions I have written down that I'm looking at.
Okay.
Okay, uh, did you watch that remake? The one that's just called Blair Witch.
I did,
You
yes.
did.
Yes.
What did you think about it?
Here's what I think. I think that Adam Wingard and Simon Barrett are really good filmmakers, and I think that they were hamstrung by a requirement to make it a found footage or kids in the woods with shaky cam.
Uh,
And I honestly believe that anyone who thinks that for something to be a Blair Witch story, it has to be that kind of shaky cam in the woods, they fundamentally misunderstand the entire point of the franchise.
mm-hmm.
And so I think that, quite honestly, I think that I mean, look, the our original movie has never been released on home video properly
Mm-hmm.
until really now,
Mm-hmm.
with
Yeah.
with a UK company doing a restoration.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's fair to say the IP is owned by a distributor that doesn't get it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They don't understand it. They didn't even know. I don't even believe they knew that one of their best performing films ever had never been released properly on home video. And it's because, honestly, when the film came out, you have to remember that Heather, Mike, and Josh were derided
Mm-hmm.
as like not really giving performances.
Mm.
And I'm here to tell you, they 100% were giving performances, and that was not their real selves.
No, I can
You know,
tell.
and people don't understand this, but when you go to the locations, you realize like, oh crap, like this scene took place, and just 10 feet that way is a bike path where hikers walk by, and just beyond those trees over there is a target, and just it's like I don't, and yeah, like seven, when you're 5 days in the woods, and you're eating less and you're sleeping less, and you're in this real-time scenario, you're you're doing multiple takes. You still, you're not, they didn't have to set up their own tents. You know what I mean? Like that's
Right.
what the production crew did.
Right.
it's like it's still a movie, and everybody was still aware that it was a production. So yeah, we shot it different, but none of that. Like Ed and Dan as writer directors didn't get any respect because people said they just casted these three and gave them some cameras and sent them out in the woods and then just came back with whatever, which is not true.
No, not at all.
The actors didn't get credit because, oh, well, they were just reacting to scary stuff that the filmmakers were doing. Not true. I mean, they were reacting new, but they were acting the whole time.
No,
And then, and then it was like when the film came out, it was just treated as a lark, and it gave people the opportunity to not have to really deal with the film as it was, which is, I think, this kind of crazy experimental film that caught hold of people, and it was just like, and they were able to call the internet experience marketing. But I'm here to tell you that we never thought of it as marketing. We were just telling a story online because we had fans. People had managed to hear about the movie before we were finished because of the website, and they started to come, and all of that was organic. We weren't placing ads, we weren't marketing anything. We weren't finished with the film, and we didn't even know if we were going to get it in Sunday. We didn't even know if we were going to ever get this film into theaters.
Right.
And that's and so I think that's the kind of thing where it made it easy for Artisan to just completely disintermediate all of us as creators and hire on other directors to make other sequels and ignore the franchise that we created, ignore the mythology that we created, because I think for some executives that's too much to read. It's just too much information to read and keep in their heads, I guess. But the fact that it's been 25 years and the original distributor didn't care and didn't understand the film enough to even know that they had been putting out a wrong version, even though, and for make no mistake, we've tried to communicate that to them over the years. It's amazing how, when they're not interested in hearing from you, easy it is not to respond to emails or return phone calls. And so, when this small company licensed the rights to release it in the UK and reached out to us to see if we'd record a new commentary track, we jumped on it and said, we'll do you one better. We'll help you get a full restoration of the film and put it out for the first time the way we always wanted it put out.
Right.
And and now here we sit, like in the UK and in Europe, Blair Witch fans can see it the way it was always intended, but it's a region B Blu-ray, and so fans in the US and in other territories can't see it yet. And I'm hoping that none of us make money from the film anymore. So like even the restoration, none of us make any money from the film, and that's another story for another time.
Of course.
But if the people responsible for the IP really knew the IP, they would have known that the film was not out on home video properly, and they would have corrected that. But they didn't, because they didn't know. I don't even think they knew until they might only be just learning now with some of the press coming out. To be honest, we have no relationship with them, but I sincerely hope that they will look at it, and I do hope that this version is the version that they then license exclusively to streamers, and that I hope they put it out in the U.S. and Canada and everywhere else, South America, because this is really the intent of the film, was to have it look like video. You see, the way they did it originally was in 1999 there were no video projectors in theaters. Right. In 2024 there are only video projectors in most theaters. Only the good ones still have 35 millimeter and sometimes 70 millimeter projection. But and so back in the day we had to do this process called telecine, where they took our digibeta master, because the film was shot on high 8 and edited on video, and they took our digibeta master and they did what's called a telecine, which is essentially they take a 35 millimeter camera and they shoot it at a TV screen, a special TV screen in a controlled environment, and they do some kind of pull down method, so you change the frame rate from 30 frames to 24 frames, and that's how you get a 35 millimeter negative of a video film. And so in the theaters, our high 8 footage had film grain. It
Mm-hmm.
was the only way to show the film. But when it came time to come out in home video, what they did was, instead of going to the digibeta master and putting that out on video, which is how it should have been,
Mm-hmm.
which then would have been, you're seeing now raw high 8 home video as if it was coming right off the camera onto your TV.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it always should have looked. What they did was they took the 35 millimeter print and then they telecinied it back to video. So
Mm.
they took a 30 frame per second video master, converted it to 24 frames per second off of this telecine process, which is not great already.
Mm-hmm.
Then telecinied the 24 frames per second back to 30 frames per second. So not only do you have a lot of dropped frames, but then you have a bunch of added frames that are interpolated.
Mm.
And so the frames that are added are just sort of the, half versions of the frames between and before. And that messes up the movement. And to give you a sense of what it did, it converted every hard cut in the film, which was every edit in the film, into a 3-frame dissolve.
Mm.
Now, that doesn't sound like much, but psychologically, the difference between a 3-frame dissolve and a cut makes a difference when you watch something.
Right.
And the motion makes a difference, and the thing about it is this new cut, the motion, you look like you're watching high 8 video. You
Mm.
look like you're actually watching the tapes that they filmed.
Okay.
And when we cut to 16 millimeter, it actually looks now like 16 millimeter because it's been transferred directly from 16 to video for this, as opposed to transferred from 16 to video, then video to 35, then 35 back to video.
Right.
And so it's not, this was not about making it look good or
Mm-hmm.
making it look clean. This is about making it look authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And finally it's out, and so now I just hope that it comes out and people can see it the way it was originally intended.
I mean, I watched the remake out of just curiosity myself. I didn't really wasn't too invested, but I'm like, what are they gonna do? Like, I gotta know, you know. I watched it at like my local $5 theater because there's a couple in the area that I live in, and I just sat there and I'm like this isn't like, this is so overdone. It's really loud. I mean, it's not awful, but I'm just like, this is really not Blair Witch, like very much at all. And
Yeah, that's the thing. The spirit of Blair Witch is putting something in front of people that's unexpected,
mm-hmm.
that's that's fresh and new, and doesn't feel like everything else that they've seen.
Right. No, definitely. And it's just all a lot of the same gags of like, you're in the woods lost and you find the stick things, and ooh, it's creepy, and then they show the witch herself, which I was like, come on guys, really?
Yeah.
It's like, it was like that Paranormal Activity movie, like one of the last found footage ones that they made,
Right.
where they show you the ghost dimension. There we go. Where they show you the ghost on the cameras, and the whole thing was not showing you the ghost. It was the ghost doing stuff, and it's scary because now one thing is there, and when it was over there, but you see the Venom symbiote just kind of floating around doing stuff, and it's not scary at all.
Yeah.
So no, I wholeheartedly agree with your assessment of the remake. I was just more curious as to whether or not you saw it. But no, totally. If you don't want me to put this in the segment,
No, it's okay. It's okay. I think I didn't want Simon or Adam to feel like I was, because I know that I know the requirements that they were given.
I think you made a very impassioned a very impassioned point with like why you feel like this movie was done dirty, and obviously all the actors weren't given the proper respect they should have been, and really like they really should have been. They acted their butts off.
Yeah.
I don't know how you can see that movie and think, yeah, no, they're just reacting. Like, those reactions come from something else.
This is when I think about, like, here's the thing that's interesting about this version coming out 25 years later, is because 25 years later, and this is something that there's a new commentary on the disc by not people who are involved in the film, but they're people who have studied the film and talk about it. And I listened to it last night for the first time. And it really kind of made me emotional, because they started talking about the fact that and this is something I never articulated, but I think all of us felt, and that the artistry of the movie has never really been acknowledged. I mean, people look at it and they're like, it's slapdash, it's haphazardly put together, it looks messy. Ed and Dan edited this film for 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if anybody thinks they were just chopping scenes together like crazy, they're insane. There's lines of dialogue that were pulled from other discussions in different parts of the movie that were put over footage. You know, you never see the characters really speaking because they're not on camera when they're speaking. They're often holding the camera. And so we're able to construct conversations and put lines in different places. I mean, it is a superbly constructed movie. And but you know, and horror films are never going to get any kind of recognition, but I thought in my head, I kind of thought any film editor should recognize the achievement of this film as a, you know, in the editing room, the way this film was put together. But not even that, like you know what I mean, like in Hollywood they didn't even recognize that,
Mm-hmm.
the editing. And that's what I mean by like the hype of it all, and the fact that it came from us as outsiders scared the crap out of Hollywood. And you know, if your job is to know what people want and to develop those things on behalf of your studio, and then a bunch of goofballs from Orlando put something out that kind of dominates the entire summer in a year, you know, outside of Star Wars Episode One, Phantom Menace, and you know, Kubrick's last film and The Sixth Sense. I think that, you know, Blair Witch was probably the most talked about film after those, maybe even a little bit more. But you know, and for that to happen to Hollywood is scary as hell, right? Especially scary if you feel like your job's at risk because nobody in Hollywood saw this one coming, and nobody in Hollywood saw the internet coming, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it just became easier to kind of sit there and go, there are no lessons to learn from that. It was a complete fluke. You know, it's just a bunch of people who got lucky. And so, you know, Ed and Dan were never given the opportunities as filmmakers, and Heather, Mike, and Josh were never given proper opportunities as actors. And I think, you know, Greg, Rob, and I were never really given proper opportunities as producers. So,
Mm-hmm.
and none of us got really recognized for the creative work. It was just kind of seen as slapdash, and none of it with intent, when, you know, we were working with intent throughout the entire process. I mean, we, you know, I don't want to brag, but I had been to Sundance like 5 times before we took this film. And when we got on the ground at Sundance, we knew how to market this film at Sundance.
Mm-hmm.
And we did, you know, we created special posters that were designed specifically for Sundance. We knew what kind of things to bring to promote it. We knew who our target was. You know, we weren't trying to sell tickets. We were trying to show the distributors that this film could be marketed as a traditional horror film. And because we knew that our market there was not everybody coming to buy a ticket. It was the 6 or 7 distributors who had enough budget to possibly buy this film and distribute it. You know, and so we weren't dummies who just kind of stumbled out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
We were extremely strategic, and we spent a lot of time discussing every aspect of what we were doing. And it was, even though it looks haphazard and it intentionally looks rough, it was crafted to within an inch of its life. And I hope that this new transfer might show that to people.
I feel like it will. I really feel like it will, because I, especially these days, I think they're not as out and about, because obviously the big things are like Marvel movies and remakes, right? But I do feel like there still are like core communities of film, of film lovers who will be like, as excited as I am to see the Blair Witch, something like the Blair Witch, presented as it should be, in the proper format.
Yeah.
I feel like that's always going to exist, because the appreciation for good art never really goes away. It's always there, even if it's not, what, profiteers and people who make or who want to make money really look for. They want the numbers, not really people who care, right?
Yeah.
It's an unfortunate reality. The money talks, right, as
Yes.
they say. So, but I do feel like Blair Witch, it's gonna be. I feel like it's gonna be given that second wind with this re-release. If
I think so.
Yeah, I think so too. And to sort of like, piggyback off that, off of that just now. Why do you think people still talk about the Blair Witch Project? Why do you think it's still had like as the staying power it's had?
Oh, that's a good question. Here's having made a lot of things over the years now, there's something unique about Blair Witch in that, um, look, I worked at a film festival, and I've been around filmmakers, and I've been around filmmakers when fans come up to them and talk about their movies that
Mm-hmm.
they saw. And the thing about Blair Witch is that when people find out I was involved, the story they always want to tell me, and I absolutely love this. I'm not complaining at all. I love hearing this. Um, People tell me about the first time they saw the movie,
Mm.
and they remember everything, whether they saw it in a theater or whether they saw it, on home video in the middle of the night, or
Mm-hmm.
whether they watched it with a bunch of friends at a sleepover, or whether, however they watched it. It's like it's almost like the experience of watching the movie became an indelible memory. And it's amazing because people will tell me details about seeing the movie. And there's a few movies that I have like that I saw in the theater, and the experience was so overwhelmingly powerful that I remember, you know, giving the usher my ticket, and I remember exactly what the theater looked like, and I remember what snacks I bought, and I remember what seat I was in. You can just and then other movies, I'm like, I think I saw that in the theater. Yeah, I might have, you
Right.
know. And this movie, everyone tells me the story of the first time they saw it and how it freaked them out, or the first time they saw it and they thought it was BS, whatever. But the point is that everybody kind of remembers the first time they saw it, and I think that's because it was so new and so different and so unique, and then it had become this part of pop culture. And what's interesting is even away from all of the attendant hype that happened in '99, I think people still, they tend to just kind of discover it. People will talk about it as a classic, or every once in a while, you'll see scariest movies and it'll show up, and then you'll get in the comments, and half the people love it and half the people hate it, and it becomes one of those things where people go, okay, I got to check it out myself. And for the people who it sticks with, for the people who go in and give themselves over to it, it's still an experience that's marked by, they remember who they saw it with, when they saw it, how they
Mm.
saw it. And that's why I think it still maintains its power.
And, and because I could tell you right now if you want to hear my story.
I would love to.
The first time I watched it, so as I've mentioned, I have it on VHS. It's like literally, like I could see it right here. I'm looking at it right now. It's right there. I bought it. I just started college. There was a thrift store down the street from my college, and so after classes, I'd get really bored, and like I don't want to go home yet. I got nothing better to do, so I would just go to that thrift store and just buy stuff, whether it was like used games or whatever, or books.
Right.
And they just had a ton of VHSs on the wall, and I would just always browse. I was just so curious, because I grew up with VHSs, and then obviously DVDs and Blu-rays happened, but I still had that like nostalgia for them. So I would pick out stuff here and there, and I think one day I just saw the Blair Witch Project. So it's that, it's the VHS box with Heather's face, right
Yes.
there, like covering half of it, and I'm like, I've never really watched this thing. I've always heard about it, and I even saw like the only really real exposure I had to it prior to me watching it was that that Scooby Doo parody that they did on
Yes.
Cartoon Network,
I
which
love that.
I love it too. It's so great. It's so perfectly spooky for kids.
Yes.
Um, but that was my only real exposure, and I'm like, I don't know what this is, So I grabbed it. It was like $2, so I'm like,
Yeah.
whatever. Let me grab it. My mom had an old VHS player, so I'm like, let me just watch it myself. No one's around. I put it on, and I just sat there and just experienced the whole movie, and I wasn't too scared for most of it. It was pretty tense, and I think for me at least, what gets me about the movie every time I go back to watch it is just how real those arguments are between everyone, when they're fighting, when stuff starts to really unravel. It's like sitting in with like friends that get along generally, and all of a sudden they're just having these really ugly fights, and you feel very uncomfortable. But the part where everything started to really click for me, and where the fear really like hit, was that part in the tent, where they're one of the parts in the tents when
When
they're
they
in the
run.
tent. Not when I think it's when they run, or
Mhm.
I'm not remembering entirely. It's either when they run or when they just hear a noise and they
Yes.
pause and there's like laughter and everything like starts to shake really
Yes.
badly.
That's and then they run from the tent.
And then they run from the tent. So that part got me really bad the first time I watched it. Like, ooh, no, that's bad, and that stuck with me. And then it was electrifying because then the rest of the movie happens and we get that amazing ending. Um, it really stuck with me, and then I would show it to people, and it just really annoyed me when I didn't get the reactions that I wanted. I was young, so I know better now. But I'd show it to cousins, I showed it to my mom, and all of them were like, "Okay, so it's just a bunch of people screaming in the woods. It's not that scary." But it's always stuck with me, and it's always had this special place in my heart. I actually, funnily enough, rewatched it like a couple of months ago with friends
Oh,
on Discord, and we're all like guys in our like early 30s, so we just sat and just experienced the movie, and we're just like kind of in awe on how like well made it is and how engaging it is, even just without the context of the posters and the website and all the Curse of the Blair Witch or any of that. It was still really fascinating to just watch it outside that context, and
oh,
something that I want to go back to again sometime, maybe in a couple more months, honestly.
there we go. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And hopefully you'll be able to do it with all, the new special edition that came out. Jed Shepard, who was the writer of, the Zoom horror movie Host,
Mm-hmm.
and he wrote Dashcam. He's a big fan of Blair Witch Project. He directed a making of documentary for this. That's 2.5 hours long. We shot ourselves making this film, and so we gave him all of that footage
Oh wow.
and said, go to town. And then he did new interviews. And so it's kind of like, modern day interviews, but there's a ton of archival footage. So you get to see the whole process from, you get to see casting, you get to see the discussions about what the film will be. You get to see us having a big discussion about whether we should go continue on with the original vision or make it found footage. We filmed us going to Sundance. We filmed so much. We just kind of like Heather, Mike, and Josh. We also had the cameras running on us the whole time, and so this is making of documentary. And then the team at Second Sight, because they had all the footage, they strung together 90 minutes of additional footage that
Wow.
has not been released. Well, some of the scenes have been released, but it's 90 minutes, and they did something really interesting. We didn't have anything to do with this, but they cut it together essentially in the order that it happens, and it's 90 minutes. So it's almost like if you watch the extra footage after watching the film, it's almost like you're watching a parallel film made
that sounds
up of
amazing.
completely different scenes.
Wow.
Obviously it's missing a lot because the best stuff is in the feature, but
Mm-hmm.
you can almost, like, as you watch it, you can get a sense of where it was, and you can figure out why we cut it, or maybe you have a disagreement with us and think, well, some of those scenes should have come on, because there are some scenes, like, Mike also did a farewell, but we cut it from the film because it was just too long. It just
Mm.
made the film too long.
Right. Well, I feel like myself as a fan and other people who are also fans of Blair Witch, I think, I'm looking forward to it personally. If I could get my hands on it, I don't have a region for a free player, but I'll figure something out if I could get my hands on it,
Yeah,
really.
well, hopefully it'll be available soon. Like I said, I don't have any info as to what Lionsgate's plans are, but I
Mm.
tell fans, just reach out to them on their socials and tell them you want it, because I think that's the only thing that's going to make them put it out. Is knowing that there's an audience for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'll definitely do so whenever I have the time. So we're coming to the end of our conversation here, Mike, and just want to say, really quick, thank you for
Oh,
having this chat with me.
you
Uh,
bet.
I hope, I really do appreciate your passion. You've seen you're still really passionate about what you do and what you've done with Blair Witch, and I really truly respect that.
Oh,
I
thank you.
think it's incredible to because there's that thing where sometimes artists resent the thing that they make, especially if
Yes.
it's like a big popular thing, which I can understand to a degree, but it's good to know that there are people that still appreciate what they made and have the passion that you do. So thank you for that, really.
Oh, thank you. I just feel so fortunate to have done this with, with those guys, and the folks that I got to work with on this. It was such a, I don't know how to explain it, except that it was such a just a absolutely freeing creative time,
Mm-hmm.
and I have nothing but, and make no mistake, there were some real serious challenges around aspects of the film, especially after it came out.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been able over the years to kind of put that aside and just kind of feed off all the good memories,
And
and yeah, I wouldn't trade it for the world.
I mean, that's great to know. Honestly, that's honestly really great to know because yeah, it's not honestly just watching the film, again just recently, like I said, I could tell you guys had a good time making it. It sounds like everyone
Yes.
had a great time, and I know maybe it was a lot to run through the forest for as long as you guys did, but it seems like you guys had fun at the end of the day.
Yeah. What's interesting is that the shoot was only 8 days, but the film took a year to make.
Well, I mean, editing is a
So yeah,
process.
it's like it's funny because when I think about the production of it, to me, I think about the editing because the shooting was only 8 days.
But it's 8 days
But
well
yeah.
spent.
Oh
Absolutely.
yes. Oh yes.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Mike, for sharing all this with me. And if people wanted to, find you and look at the things that you do, where can they find you? What socials do you have available
Oh
for them?
yes, I have Bluesky, so I'm
Mm.
at Mike Monello. Uh, it's at Mike Monello, just all one word, lowercase. At I think it's Mike Monello dot bsky dot social, but Mike Monello on Blue Sky. I also have Instagram, Mike Monello, and I have LinkedIn. You can find me under Michael Monello.
Awesome. And do you have any like upcoming projects you want people to know about?
We let me see, nothing announced yet, but
Okay.
we're working on some fun stuff with Campfire. We have some fun stuff on the horizon, and yeah, there are some other creative irons in the fire, but it's too early to talk about right now.
Okay, no, totally. Then mum's the word, right? We'll,
Yeah.
we'll keep that close to your chest, and I look forward to seeing them. Whatever you guys come up with. I go to cons sometimes, so maybe I'll get to
Oh,
experience some things.
excellent. That would be great.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Sincerely, thank you, Mike, for making this time with me. I didn't expect it to go on this long. Honestly, this is amazing.
Oh, good. You bet.
And I'm glad.
Thank you for asking me to talk, Eloise.
Friends are the reason